The city that vanished. Imagine a city so grand it once ruled the known world, and then vanished. No ruins, no survivors, no trace. Only its name echoed through crumbling tablets and the fading echoes of time. This is not a myth. This is the story of the first empire in human history. A civilization that rose from dust to dominate the ancient world and then returned to it, swallowed by the sands of Mesopotamia. Cradle of civilization long before Rome or Egypt's pyramids, humanity's first great cities emerged between two mighty rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. This was Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers where agriculture, writing, and organized government were born. Here, small city-states like your Uruk and Lagash competed for power, with their kings claiming divine favor from gods who watched over their walls and fields. But out of this chaos, a single man would rise to unite them all, Sargon of Akkad, a name that would echo for thousands of years. A civilization without a map, strangely. While we know of Sargon, his empire, and his legacy, no one knows where Akkad truly stood. The city, his capital, the beating heart of the Akkadian Empire, remains lost. Ancient texts describe its glory: towering ziggurats, vast palaces, and streets filled with merchants from every corner of the known world. It was said to be near the Euphrates River, perhaps north of Babylon, yet no excavation has ever confirmed its site. Scholars have searched for centuries, following clues etched into clay, mentions of Akkad in the Sumerian king list, or in hymns praising the city of kings. But like Atlantis, Akkad exists in history, and nowhere on Earth, the birth of empire. Before Akkad, the world was a patchwork of rival cities, each ruled by local kings, speaking their own dialects, worshipping their own gods. War was constant, alliances short-lived. Then came Sargon, man of obscure origin, perhaps born a servant, perhaps the son of a priestess, set adrift as an infant on the Euphrates, only to rise by fate or ambition to conquer the known world. He overthrew the Sumerian king of Kish and declared himself king of the four quarters of the world. For the first time in human history, an empire stretched from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean Sea. Under his rule, Mesopotamia became one, and the Akkadian language became the tongue of diplomacy and record. It was a transformation so profound that later civilizations from Babylon to Assyria would trace their roots back to him. The city of Akkad, heart of an empire. Akkad, his capital, was said to glitter with gold and lapis lazuli. Envoys and merchants filled its streets. Soldiers marched beneath banners of bronze. Here Sargon built temples to Ishtar, the goddess of war and love, and created a new seat of power that symbolized unity. This was the dawn of bureaucracy, taxation, and standing armies concepts the modern world still inherits from those ancient stones. Under Sargon's descendants Ramush, Manishtushu, Naram-Sin, the empire reached new heights. Naram-Sin, Sargon's grandson, would go further. He declared himself a god-king. Wearing the horned crown of divinity, and his image carved on stone steely still, radiates power today. Seeds of doubt, but history has a rhythm, and every empire that rises soon sows the seeds of its own fall. In its greatness, Akkad stretched itself thin. Distant provinces began to rebel. Famines crept in, and resentment grew. Divine arrogance alienated priesthoods and rival cities. And then without warning, the records falter. Clay tablets that once overflowed with royal decrees turn silent. Trade routes collapse. Temples are abandoned. The empire that had conquered the world vanishes from history. The silence of Akkad, no historian from the time tells us how or why. Later scribes, centuries after the fall, wrote of Akkad's curse, a divine punishment sent by the gods for the hubris of kings. One ancient lament reads, "The storm that annihilates the land came. The city was given over to destruction, its people scattered to the winds. But were the gods to blame? Or something far more human and far more terrifying? A mystery of millennia. For nearly 4,000 years, Akkad's fate remained a riddle. Did war destroy it? Did famine drive its people away? Or did nature itself rise in revolt against the first empire? This is the mystery we now set out to explore, the enigma of a civilization that achieved the impossible, only to be consumed by its own fragility. Because buried beneath the sand, beneath centuries of silence, lies a story not only of Akkad's fall, but of every civilization's greatest fear, that greatness is never permanent. And so begins our journey, to uncover what really happened to Akkad. If you've made it this far into the story of the world's first empire, thank you for joining the journey. We'll dive deep into Sargon's golden age, how he built an empire from nothing, the innovations that shaped civilization, and the first signs that foreshadowed Akkad's doom. If you love uncovering ancient mysteries and forgotten empires, don't forget to subscribe our channel Arc Studio, like, and ring the bell, because we step inside the heart of Akkad itself. Sargon's golden age, every empire begins with a dream, and one man's defiance of destiny. For Akkad, that man was Sargon, the first ruler in history to unite nations, tongues, and cultures beneath a single banner. But Sargon's story wasn't written in gold. It was written in rebellion, survival, and ambition that reshaped the course of civilization itself. The rise of Sargon, legend tells us Sargon was not born a king. He was a servant, a cupbearer in the royal court of Kish, a city-state constantly at war with its neighbors. His name, Shah Rukh, meant the true king. Some say he was the illegitimate son of a priestess who cast him adrift in a basket on the Euphrates, an echo of a tale that would one day inspire the story of Moses. Whatever his beginnings, Sargon rose through cunning and courage. He overthrew his master, Lugalzij, the king of Uruk, and declared himself ruler of Akkad, a city whose name would soon thunder across the known world. The unification of Mesopotamia, Sargon's military campaigns were unlike anything the world had seen. He conquered the independent city-states of Sumer one by one, forging the first centralized empire in human history. He standardized armies, introduced professional soldiers, and maintained garrisons across his realm, innovations that would echo through millennia. From the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean Sea, his banners flew. He subdued Elam to the east, Mari to the west, and established trade routes reaching the Indus Valley and Anatolia. No king before him had ruled over such an expanse, or such diversity. The administrative revolution, but conquest alone does not sustain an empire. Sargon knew that. So he built something far more enduring, a system, created the world's first bureaucratic state, dividing his empire into provinces, each governed by loyal officials known as Ensi. These administrators collected tribute, enforced law, and sent reports to Akkad, the empire's radiant capital. For the first time, written records became the spine of governance. Clay tablets tracked taxes, trade, labor, and royal decrees, the earliest blueprint of what we now call administration. The Akkadians also merged. The Sumerian cuneiform script with their own Semitic tongue, giving birth to the Akkadian language, the diplomatic language of the ancient Near East for over 1,000 years. The city of Akkad in the heart of the empire stood Akkad, a city so advanced that later kings spoke of it in reverence. Though lost to us today, ancient texts describe it as a city of unparalleled beauty, adorned with gleaming temples, canals, and palaces rising from fertile plains. Merchants brought lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, cedar from Lebanon, gold from Anatolia. Artisans filled workshops with intricate carvings, while priests performed sacred rituals to honor Ishtar, goddess of war and love, Sargon's divine patron. For perhaps the first time in history, a city was not just a kingdom's capital, but the beating heart of a unified civilization. It's the age of prosperity under Sargon, the empire flourished. Trade boomed, agriculture thrived, and Akkadian art reached new heights. We find in Akkadian sculpture realism expressions of power and emotion carved into stone. Weapons became not only tools of war, but symbols of authority. And religion, once localized, evolved into a state ideology, with the king as the god's chosen instrument. Sargon ruled for over 50 years. His legacy was one of order, but also ambition. He had built a world where power itself was an art, and that art was now inherited by his sons. The sons of Sargon. Upon Sargon's death, his son Rimash ascended the throne, and the first cracks began to appear. Rebellions erupted across the empire. City-states that had once bowed in submission now defied Akkadian rule. Rimash crushed the uprisings with brutal efficiency, But his reign ended abruptly. Some say he was assassinated. His brother Manishchushu then took power, restoring order and reopening trade routes. Godwill in Galathea, he expanded into the Persian Gulf and strengthened Akkad's maritime presence. Yet his rule, too, ended mysteriously, possibly at the hands of his own court. The empire, though vast and glorious, was now trembling beneath the weight of succession and unrest. Naram-Sin. The god-king then came Naram-Sin, Sargon's grandson, the man who would take Akkad to its greatest heights and set in motion its fall. He was not content to rule as a mortal, declared himself a living god, the first in recorded history to do so, wearing the horned crown reserved for deities. Under his command, Akkad became an unstoppable force. He led campaigns into the Zagros Mountains, conquered the Lulubi, and left behind the victory stele of Naram-Sin, an artistic masterpiece depicting him ascending a mountain, trampling his enemies beneath divine light. It was both a triumph and a warning. For while Naram-Sin's reign brought glory, it also brought hubris. The priests of Sumer saw his self-deification as blasphemy. Old loyalties fractured. The gods, it was said, turned their faces away. The empire had reached its peak, and at its zenith, its foundations began to shake. Seeds of collapse after decades of expansion, Akkad's borders grew thin. The costs of war, tribute, and rebellion strained its economy. Natural resources dwindled. And across the land, an unseen shadow began to spread, a slow, relentless drying of the earth. Rivers receded, fields turned to dust, and famine whispered through the once fertile plains of Mesopotamia. This was the beginning of something no army could conquer. The fall begins as internal revolts intensified. Distant tribes watched and waited. From the highlands came new forces, the Guchians, a people shrouded in mystery. They saw the empire weakened and struck. Cities that once sent tribute now burned. Akkadian control fractured and communication lines collapsed. For the first time in a century, the empire that had ruled the known world faced chaos it could not command. Naram-Sin's descendants tried to hold what remained, but the divine favor once believed to protect Akkad had faded. A golden age turns to dust within just a few generations after Sargon's death. The world's first empire dissolved. Temples were looted, trade routes silenced. The mighty city of Akkad, once the jewel of Mesopotamia, vanished. No ancient text tells us exactly how. No ruin bears its name. But the memory of its greatness endured in poems, in broken tablets, in whispers of a city cursed by the gods. The legacy of Sargon's empire set the template for all that followed: Babylon, Syria, Persia, even Rome. He proved that human vision could outlast birthright, that destiny could be forged, not inherited. But he also left behind a lesson that power, without balance, invites its own destruction. Akkad rose because of one man's dream, and fell because that dream became too heavy to hold. We'll explore the theories of collapse, the clues uncovered by modern archaeology, the climate catastrophe that may have brought down an empire, because the fall of Akkad isn't just ancient history. It's a warning carved in time. Theories of collapse. Every empire believes it will last forever. But history remembers one truth: nothing endures the weight of time. For the empire of Akkad, the end did not come with a single sword stroke. It came slowly, like a storm gathering over centuries, until the world's first empire stood helpless before forces far greater than kings. The cracks beneath the throne. When Sargon's grandson, Naram-Sin, declared himself a god, he did more than defy the heavens. He defied tradition, faith, and the natural order that held Mesopotamia together. To many of his people, his divine claim was blasphemy, a sin against the gods who had lifted their cities from mud and flood. Priests turned away. Provinces rebelled. The once rivaled empire began to fracture from within. Clay tablets tell of uprisings in Sumer and Elam, of temples desecrated, and of famine spreading across the land. Yet, this chaos may have been only a symptom, not the cause. The curse of Akkad. The ancient Sumerians tried to make sense of what happened. They called it the Curse of Akkad, one of the most haunting texts from antiquity. This lament describes a divine punishment unleashed upon Naram-Sin and his city. For the first time since cities were built and founded, the great agricultural tracts produced no grain. The inundated fields produced no fish. The irrigated orchards produced neither syrup nor wine. The gathered clouds did not rain. A world without food, without water, a world abandoned by the gods. But beneath the poetry may lie a very real catastrophe. The climate catastrophe modern science has uncovered startling evidence. Around 2200 BCE, at the height of the Akkadian Empire, the climate across the Near East changed dramatically. Sediment cores from the Persian Gulf, dust deposits from Syria, and ancient pollen samples all tell the same story. A mega drought lasting nearly 300 years. Rainfall dropped. Rivers shrank. The once fertile farmlands of Mesopotamia became arid wastelands. Without crops, famine spread like wildfire. This event wasn't local. It stretched from Egypt to the Indus Valley. Entire civilizations trembled. For AKD, whose power rested on agricultural tribute, it was a death sentence. As the drought deepened, migrations began. Nomadic tribes moved into Akkadian lands in search of food and water, straining resources already on the brink of collapse. The empire had faced armies before, but never the slow, unrelenting enemy of climate: internal strife. As nature turned against them, Akkad's people turned against each other. Records from later Babylonian copies suggest rebellions erupted across the empire. Cities like Ur-Oma and Lagash, once loyal vassals, revolted, trade collapsed, communications broke down. The empire that had united Mesopotamia now fractured into rival city-states once again. Inscriptions hint that even Naram-Sin himself faced mutiny among his soldiers, men starving, their families dying in parched villages. Desperation breeds defiance. And soon, the mighty Akkadian army, once the envy of the ancient world, could no longer hold the frontiers. The invaders from the mountains, as Akkad weakened, new shadows appeared beyond the mountains, the Gutians. Little is known of them. To the Akkadians, they were barbarians from the Zagros highlands, fierce, elusive, and utterly foreign. Their origins remain mysterious, their language undeciphered, their legacy carved only in the words of those they conquered. Later Sumerian scribes would describe them as a people who know no agriculture, who know no gods. To the civilized world of Mesopotamia, they were the embodiment of chaos. When the Gutians swept down into the valleys, they found an empire broken, cities starving, armies fragmented. One by one, Akkadian strongholds fell. Agada, the great capital, disappeared from the records. Some texts suggest they sacked it completely, others that famine had already emptied it. Either way, the light of Akkad flickered and died. The silent years for nearly a century, Mesopotamia plunged into darkness. The Gutians ruled, but their control was scattered. They left no great monuments, no centralized power. Trade collapsed. Art declined. Writing itself grew scarce. It was as if civilization had paused, holding its breath. And then, just as suddenly, the Gutians vanished. Their wake rose a new dynasty, the third dynasty of Ur, led by King Ur-Nammu, who rebuilt cities, restored canals, and revived the land. Civilization had survived, but Akkad was gone. The archaeological hunt centuries passed. Akkad's name lived on only in legend, its location unknown. But modern archaeology has tried to resurrect its memory. Scholars have proposed several possible sites: Tel Brak, Sippar, Mari, Baghdad, and most recently, Tel Muhammad near the Tigris. Each clue brings us closer, yet the true city remains elusive. Satellite imagery reveals traces of ancient riverbeds and foundations beneath modern. Iraqi soil hints of where Akkad might have stood before the Great Drought shifted the landscape forever. To this day, no stone with Akkad's name has been found. Its ruins may lie buried under centuries of sand and urban sprawl, or lost forever beneath the Tigris floodplain. Theories intertwine, so what really destroyed the world's first empire? Was it climate? The fury of a changing earth? Was it rebellion and misrule? The arrogance of kings turned divine? Or was it the Gutians, a final wave of destruction that wiped the map clean? Perhaps it was all of them. Perfect storm, environmental, political, and spiritual, that ended an era. And yet, even in its ruin, Akkad changed the world. From its ashes rose systems of government, trade, and culture that formed the foundation of every empire to come. Echoes through time today, when archaeologists brush dust from ancient tablets, They hear Akkad's faint echo in languages, in laws, in the very idea of empire. Its fall was not the end, but a transformation. It's a lesson written in stone, water, and wind. That civilization, no matter how advanced, remains at the mercy of the forces it cannot control. The same rivers still flow, the same lands still thirst, and the same questions linger. What happens when our own empires face their drought? The fall of Akkad is more than a story of loss. It's a mirror. A reminder that even in the age of kings, the mightiest walls could not stand against the smallest shift in nature. We'll step into the echoes of a lost empire, uncovering the archaeological clues, the new discoveries reshaping our understanding, and the enduring legacy of the empire that refused to be forgotten. If you're still with us on this journey through time, remember to subscribe, share, and join us again, because the search for ACD isn't over. It's only just beginning. The search continues, empires fall, but their echoes never truly fade. The story of Akkad might have ended thousands of years ago, but its legend still pulses beneath the sands of Mesopotamia, waiting for its voice to be heard again. For centuries, the city's true location has remained one of archaeology's most haunting mysteries. Ancient tablets mention Akkad, yet none reveal precisely where it stood. Scholars have scoured the deserts between the Tigris and Euphrates, guided by fragments of text, shards of pottery, and faint traces of settlements that whisper of greatness long gone. The hunt for the lost capital. In the 19th century, as archaeology blossomed in the ancient Near East, explorers unearthed countless cities, your Uruk, Nineveh, Babylon, but not Akkad. It was as if the earth itself had conspired to erase it. Some claimed the city was buried beneath modern Baghdad. Others argued it lay north near Kish, or to the west, closer to the Euphrates. Yet every expedition returned with the same haunting answer: nothing. But in the 21st century, new tools began to shift the search. Satellite imagery, ground-penetrating radar, and drone surveys offered new eyes to see through time. Archaeologists began to detect subtle patterns in the soil, outlines of walls, canals, and temples hinting that Akkad's ghost was not gone, only waiting for us to listen. In 2023, a joint Iraqi-French team announced that they had uncovered ruins near the ancient city of Kish, potentially belonging to the Akkadian heartland. Fragments of inscriptions and administrative tablets written in Sumerian and Akkadian script bore references to Akkad, the city of Sargon. Though far from conclusive, these finds reignited the hope that Akkad's lost metropolis might finally be within reach. Akkad's through civilizations, even if Akkad itself remains buried, its legacy shaped everything that came after. The Babylonians inherited its administrative systems. The Assyrians borrowed its imperial model and military precision. Even the language, Akkadian, survived for over 1,000 years, becoming the diplomatic and scholarly language of Mesopotamia long after its empire fell. In truth, Akkad never truly died. It lived on in clay tablets and the laws of Hammurabi, in the strategies of kings, and in the stories of Gilgamesh that echoed through ages. Its collapse wasn't just an end, it was a transformation, a passing of the torch that lit the path of history. Lessons from HED, and yet the story of HED also carries a warning, one that feels eerily familiar in our modern age. Climate change, resource exhaustion, political division, the very forces that might have undone the world's first empire, are now shadows looming once again over ours. Archaeological evidence from northern Mesopotamia shows that by 2200 BCE, the once fertile lands had turned to dust, crops failed, people migrated south, cities fell silent. It was a civilization that grew too fast, stretched too far, depended too deeply on the whims of nature until nature turned away. Akkad reminds us that greatness is fragile, that progress unchecked by balance can sow the seeds of its own destruction, and that no empire, ancient or modern, is immune to the cycle of rise, glory, and fall. The eternal mystery even today, deep beneath the shifting sands, the heart of Akkad sleeps. Perhaps one day an archaeologist's brush will uncover its streets, its palaces, its temple to Ishtar. Perhaps the city's long silence will finally break. But maybe Akkad's mystery is part of its message. A reminder that not all greatness is meant to last forever, and that what endures is not the stone or the city, but the story, epilogue, the legacy of Akkad. From Sargon's first march across the Sumerian plains to the last echoes of Akkadian prayers carved in cuneiform, the Empire of Akkad marked humanity's first true experiment in unity. A single ruler, one system, one language, binding a world together. And though it vanished, it left behind the blueprint for every empire that followed. Rome, Persia, Byzantium, all stood upon the same foundations first laid in Akkad. So the next time you look at the ruins of an ancient civilization, remember the city that cannot be found. Remember Akkad, the empire that built the idea of empire itself? Endnote. Call to action if this journey through time moved you. Don't let Akkad's memory fade again. Share this story, comment your theories about where Akkad truly lies, and join us as we uncover more lost worlds from the sands of history. Until next time, stay curious, stay awake, and keep searching for the cities that time tried to erase.